Hi, welcome to the Southeast Seasonal Outlook for April 2025. My name's Matt Lieschke and I'm a Senior Ag Advisor with Local Land Services based out of Goulburn. In this video, I'll be taking a look at seasonal conditions across the Southeast, the impact of the late March rain, and what we can expect to see in the month ahead. At present, we have huge differences in seasonal conditions across the Southeast region, which is illustrated by the photos which were taken just prior to the late March rain event. Now, while the two photos are a big contrast, in a local context, they're actually not that unusual for this time of the year and highlights the large variation that we have in the Southeast region in terms of climate and seasonal rainfall patterns. This slide is a screenshot from the Bureau of Meteorology Australian Water Outlook, and what this shows is rainfall year to date across the Southeast region leading up to that late March rainfall event. And so what we've seen this year is a really strong east to west pattern with a lot more rain on the eastern side of the dividing range, which is picked up in the colours on the map. On the eastern side of the range, a lot of areas have tallied up 200 millimetres plus for the year, with some areas along the coast recording over 300 millimetres year to date. It's worth noting that some areas on the Monaro and around the Yass region have not only had much drier start to 2025, but they also had a really tough spring last year and were really struggling. Now, thankfully, some of these areas received good rain over the weekend, but unfortunately, some missed out and are still waiting for a decent drink to get their season underway. So let's look now at what rainfall fell over the weekend. And so to do that, I've pulled up the Farming Forecaster website, and here we have a screenshot from Farming Forecaster showing rainfall totals, which are measured through automatic rain gauges, rainfall totals across the last 7 days of March. It's a little bit hard to see at this level, so what I'll do now is I'll just zoom in on the northern half of that rain gauge network and have a bit of a closer look, and then we'll move to the southern half. So if we look at the northern part of the network, again, we can see this same east to west pattern as what we've seen all year so far. The Gerringong probe, if we look at the far right hand side of the screen, the Gerringong probe recorded over 200 mils in that late March rain, bringing the tally up to 575 mils for the year. So very wet on the south coast. We also saw some really good rain in the southern highlands around that Moss Vale, Sutton Forest area. The Sutton Forest probe there measured 53 mils. And moving a little bit further to the west, we can see that the Paddy's River probe picked up 31. So some pretty good rain through that area, which was already carrying pretty good soil moisture. But unfortunately, as we move further to the west, we can really see, unfortunately, these rainfall totals diminish and taper off. There was some reasonable rainfall around the Yass area, with a lot of these sites around Yass, Murrum Bateman recording around 20 to 25 mils in parts, which is a good start, but we'll certainly need some good follow-up rain in the next fortnight to keep things going and achieve an autumn break. Moving to the southern part of the network now, which picks up the Monaro and far south coast, we can see here that the coastal probe sites picked up 100 plus mils and has really consolidated a very good start to the year. It's important to note though that for a lot of the areas along the coast, on a long-term average, February, March are actually the stronger months of the year in terms of rainfall, and the coastal region really relies on good rainfall over summer and into autumn to set the season up, as rainfall through winter can drop off a bit. If we now look on the Monaro sites, it was great to see some really good general soaking rain across the region, with most gauges registering between 25 mils and up to 44 millimetres. So really well-timed rain, and hopefully with a bit of follow-up rainfall in April, we should see some reasonable feed in paddocks leading into winter. So that's a quick overview of current conditions, but what can we expect to see for the rest of autumn? This is the Bureau's long-range forecast for April and May. Now, most of you will be familiar with this output from the Bureau, which shows the chance of exceeding median rainfall. If we look at these screenshots, we can see that April is looking a lot more positive than May at present. So it'll be important to keep an eye on the May forecast in the coming weeks to see how things develop. While April is looking fairly promising for rain, it's important to click on the map and actually delve into a bit more detail. So let's quickly now have a look at 3 areas in the southeast in a bit of detail. And the 3 areas I'm going to focus on are Bynalong, Cooma, and Sutton Forest. Bynalong is in the light green shaded zone on the map, so a 55 to 60% chance of exceeding median rainfall. Now, rather than just looking at the colours on the map, if you actually click on your location, so zoom in and click on your location, it brings up this additional box with some extra information. And I think this is really important because when you look at the information displayed in this way, what it shows is the historical median for that month, for that location. And it also shows the likelihood of rainfall being in the bottom 20%, or decile 1 or 2 of historical records, the top 20%, which is decile 9 and 10, and the 3 ranges in between. The long-term average probability or usual chance is indicated by the horizontal dashed line. And so what we're really looking at here is how do the grey bars or the forecast sit relative to that dotted line. If the grey bar is below the line, there is a less chance than normal. So for Bynalong, even though it's in that light green zone on the map, which looks good, the grey bars actually don't vary that much from the dotted line. So there's actually pretty even odds at this stage across all rainfall deciles. So in other words, it could go either way. So for Bynalong, not only is the forecast reasonably neutral at this stage for April, but we're also dealing with a very dry soil at present. Unfortunately, this site only picked up 16 millimetres over the weekend, and we saw a small increase in soil moisture at 10 centimetres on the Farming Forecaster website, but unfortunately the soil is bone dry underneath. So being dry at this time of the year in that Yass area is not unusual, and things could turn quickly if we get good rain in April or early May. But at the same time, it would be important to think through your strategies if April ends up being dry. So we're now looking at the forecast for the Muniong probe, which is about 16 kilometres northwest of Cooma on the Monaro. You'll notice the long-term median rainfall for this site is pretty similar to Bynalong, around about 30 mils for April. And the odds are also very similar in terms of being slightly in favour of above median rainfall, but the grey bars are still pretty close to that dotted line in most decile ranges. And there's still around a 1 in 4 chance of being drier than normal. The positive though for this site is, compared to Bonalong, is it actually received some really good rain over the weekend, recording around 50 millimetres in total. And it's actually the biggest rainfall event since April last year. And looking at the probe on Farming Forecaster, we can see that that recent rainfall event has really boosted soil moisture to depth. So even though April outlook is fairly neutral and things could go either way, the recent rain has really taken the pressure off April to a large degree, and now even small amounts of moisture from here on will be valuable to keep things ticking along. The final location that we'll look at now is Sutton Forest, and so we've now moved to a slightly darker shading on the map, and we're now dealing with this 60 to 65% chance of exceeding median rainfall. So even though a dry April is still possible, there's 11% chance of an unusually dry April, less than 34 mils, in the decile 1 and 2 bands. The grey bars are certainly more skewed towards median rainfall or better. So the odds are certainly pointing in the right direction. And the other thing to mention here is that the median rainfall is a lot higher. We've now gone from 30 odd mils long-term average to almost 70. And soil moisture is looking very healthy after 57 millimetres over the weekend. So when we look at overall soil moisture combined with a more positive forecast and a higher median, higher rainfall environment, this site, Sutton Forest in the Southern Highlands, is sitting in a very comfortable position. So in summary, for the Tablelands and Monaro regions, the last 3 to 4 months has been really patchy due to storm rainfall, and this patchiness largely continues. Some areas have now got a start, other areas are still eagerly waiting for an autumn break. Particularly on the tablelands, I think one of the positives about the warm and dry conditions in March is it's actually been quite good for reducing worm larvae on pastures and giving us an opportunity to really open pastures up, which will help down the track with clover germination. The obvious downside to the dry March is the ongoing dry conditions means that supplementary feeding will be required for a bit longer yet, but hopefully not too long. Autumn lambing and calving systems will be under the most pressure at the moment, and it's really important to ensure energy and protein requirements are being met in the lead up to lambing and calving and into lactation, especially for twin bearing ewes. Once the green feed comes away, it will be short, but of high quality, and that little bit of green pick makes a big difference to the amount of supplement required. While the forecast for April is looking okay, generally, for a lot of locations, it really could go either way. And fingers crossed, April ends up being a good month, but it would be important, if you're still dry and haven't got a start, to start thinking about winter options and strategies if April turns dry. For the coastal areas and country on the eastern side of the Dividing Range, these areas are sitting in a really comfortable position at the moment, following some really good rain over the last 3 to 4 months. Summer growing species, they've grown a lot of feed in paddocks, but it's important to remember that these species are approaching the end of their growing cycle and are prone to frost damage. And so we can have a situation where we have a lot of feed in paddocks, but can quickly become of quite low quality for livestock once it's frosted. One thing we can do at this time of the year, and as we move towards the colder months, is apply a bit of grazing pressure to actually prolong the quality of those summer growing species for a bit longer into autumn, and that's a bit of a frost hardening type effect where those species, through grazing, gradually become adapted to those cooler conditions. And what grazing will also do is not only prolong quality in those summer growing species, but it will actually give space and light to our temperate species, which are our winter growing species, grasses and subclover, which will then be key pasture species that will really drive production from now through to spring. Well, thank you for watching. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out. My contact details are there on the screen. Thank you.